Hello and welcome to Talking AI, a podcast about all things artificial intelligence, brought to you by Scan AI. My name's Nikki Dean. I'm a technology presenter with a particular interest in artificial intelligence. My co-host for the series is Dan Parkinson. He's the Director of Collaboration at Scan AI, and he'll be bringing his expertise and real-world experience to the table, so I believe.
I'll do my best.
Every week we're going to be taking a look at a different topic that's affected by artificial intelligence. And this time around, it's all about retail and how artificial intelligence is used. We're going to be taking a look at what it looks like right now, what it might look like in the future, and how that's going to affect both consumers and retailers. So before we get going down, when we say retail, it might seem like an obvious thing, but what are we actually referring to? What does that terminology encompass?
Well, I mean, retail is sort of it's an industry, anything where you can buy anything. It's the short version of it. I mean, 10 years ago, that was shops, that was bricks and mortar shops. E-tail, went through its rise throughout the early 2000s, and a lot of websites came about. It is effectively anything where you can sort of buy and sell. So that could be a food shop, it could be clothes shopping, car shops. Scan have both a retail and an e-tail presence. We've got a bricks and mortar shop downstairs, and then we've got a website. So
yeah. Which I think a lot of retailers do both now, don't they? Certainly straddle the two. So we're talking about physical stores that you can walk into and also online shopping, just to clarify what we mean when we say retail. So let's take a look at what retail looks like right now with the use of artificial intelligence, maybe in physical stores. So what kind of things are happening right now? How's it being used and utilised?
So again, we covered some of this last week. It's probably used a lot in the back end of a business, for the marketing side, for the logistics that then feeds that. Feed, maybe not necessarily the right word, but where products and stuff needs to be moved from a central distribution hub and then moved to certain stores if you're a multi-site business. So there will be AI behind the scenes in that. Actually, what customers will see day to day is probably something a little bit more of around the actual end user experience.
Yeah.
So targeted advertising, targeted marketing. So, everything that couples into digital signage and whatever that looks like. But then also at the till and the checkout as well. So a lot of this is anything that, and again, we discussed it last week, anything that can be automated is very good for AI workloads. So there's certain large retailers looking at CCTV analysis at the actual the till, the checkout point. So there's something that they call slippage, which is products and stuff that are not necessarily paid for. So that needs to be, these cashierless tills that we talked about before. They will have some form of camera on there that's sort of scanning and looking at what's being put in the bag. Is it scanned? Is it put in a bag? And it's got to make a very quick decision. If somebody hasn't potentially scanned a bunch of bananas, that then needs to make a very fast decision that that's not been paid for, and then feed that back to a security guard who then needs to intervene. Yeah. So a lot of normal things that we would normally experience can be automated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think artificial intelligence, which you talked about, can be a little bit overwhelming, or people think, what does it mean? It's scary. At the heart of it is it's improving the customer journey, our experience. We do expect things to happen quickly now, don't we? And things like that, automating those particular processes and, things like targeted ads, which I want to talk about in a bit. It's all there, obviously, to drive sales, let's be honest about it, but also to make our experience better, quicker, more efficient. So when you say digital signage there, just for people who might not totally understand what that means or what that looks like in stores, what is that?
So traditionally you would have seen, printed banners or whatever that looks like, products. Say, for example, we'll take a large supermarket, in a Heinz or any other brand, decides that they want to target and promote a specific product. They will print out media and then have that placed in certain parts of the store. Digital signage is sort of the e-tail version of that. It's digitizing a lot of that marketing, but then allows that content to be changed as well. So you don't necessarily have to just have a fixed image. Products can be, or products that can be displayed on that can be changed quite frequently.
A good example, I think, so we also do a a program here at Scan called Inside AI. I don't know if you caught rather this particular. I'm getting very excited. This particular episode where we looked at retail and using the example of digital signage, it was a solution that Scan do with Biablu, whereby, and I haven't actually seen this in a store myself, but I would be really interested to, whereby it analyzes your facial features as you walk past to determine your gender, your age, and then it obviously makes particular assumptions about you and then send through to you an advert that would be applicable to me and not you. Then you walk by and you get something entirely different. Is that something we're going to see implemented everywhere in the future, or what's going to happen in that?
Yeah. And I think there's certain films of, I think it was Minority Report, where you walk past a screen and then that automatically changes the advert. You know, a long, long time ago, there's been other films where they've got little camera sensors in there and that changes the artwork potentially. So yes, it's almost a transformation of that digital industry. So it's gone from simply digitizing marketing and giving an easier way to present content to people, now to having AI powered solutions behind that as well, to then make that more of a targeted approach. So exactly what you said of using AI algorithms and models to scan who's looking at this marketing to say that, you know, they've come to a certain part of the store for a reason. Let's best guess and do some analytics of when certain products will be more relevant to that person. So it's targeting that experience. Again, exactly what you said. It's making that customer journey a bit more efficient, presenting stuff that's more relevant to you. Like you go to, I don't know, say a clothes store, you don't want to be seeing adverts for bottles of water. You might do if it's really warm, but you maybe you're looking in a pants section, you want to see adverts for belts and shoes that would match it. Yeah. So
for our southern listeners, we mean trousers.
Pants, trousers, bottom halves.
Yes.
But yeah, it's targeting that approach, so you get a bit more of an efficient journey. So you're not necessarily showing adverts for, I don't know, whatever, makeup or dresses when you're in a particular section that, you know, you've got something in your hand and they want to target. It's again, it's a sales experience. It's trying to get you to buy more things.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, but it's giving you a targeted experience. Everyone does it day in, day out. A lot of websites now have these tracking cookies or targeted marketing, and that's exactly what it's doing.
That's a good example of us walking into a physical store where we've maybe still got cashiers and we've still got that experience with around people, but how AI can be used to kind of complement that. Is there any other ways maybe that we've not thought of that AI is being used alongside to complement sort of the traditional shopping experience with a cashier and somebody on the changing rooms and that personalised experience that I think we all quite like?
Yeah. I mean, when you say not thought of, I mean not a business idea. Oh.
No, I mean, is there any sort of, are there any, other than that example of maybe digital signage and stuff, are there any other examples of things that maybe we wouldn't quite realise is driven by data that's come from artificial intelligence or machine learning, deep learning, or something that's powering the experience that we have when we go in store?
Not so much in store. I suppose that's, at the minute, that's going to be limited to the certain applications. Behind the scenes in the warehouse, for example, Ocado are very big protagonists of this, and there's a lot of that information out there in the public. You know, they've got fully automated warehouses. They've got robots that's all built on AI-powered systems.
Wow, so that's just robots in the warehouse?
Yeah, well, there's more than just robots, but the majority of the actual pickers are robots, and it's quite a powerful system, really, and it's all designed on tracks and robots that have all been automated and designed to go on most efficient route to go and find a certain thing that needs to be picked and packed, and then that gets then passed to the driver. So behind the scenes, potentially, there's stuff that goes on, as I said, again, with marketing from internal spending, with that logistics that feeds a store. So a multi-site business, you know, may have a distribution center where all of the goods are come in and prepared, but then having the logistics of the drivers then coming in to pick up certain bits and pieces to go and deliver it to certain stores in the most efficient route, that could be AI powered. So probably behind the scenes to give you a better experience. Maybe there's a lot more on the face of it that you'll see. There are a few things that are coming to market now, things like frictionless stores. That's a different experience. That's all AI powered. From an e-tail perspective, again, something that's almost baked into a lot of websites now. We discussed this very briefly last week, was at the fraud detection side. So a lot of that now is AI powered, and that's a very important part of any business. No one wants to be caught out with fraud, but no one wants to be frauded. So highlighting, detecting what is fraud in almost a real-time environment is critical to businesses, but more so to consumers as well, to protect consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, frictionless store term you use there, we have spoken about it briefly in previous episodes, but just to make it super clear, what do we mean when we say that?
Wow. In a nutshell, it's a store without cashiers, without checkouts. Effectively, it's an experience that feels like theft, but it's it's a store. It's a shopping store at the minute. A lot of them are food stores that you can go in, pick something up from a shelf. It knows what you've picked up, and there is a whole process that feeds that behind the scenes, but there are no checkouts, there are no cashiers. You were literally going in, picking something up off a shelf and walking out, and then getting billed for that.
Yeah, which just sounds absolutely mind-blowing. I haven't actually physically been in one, but I think I mentioned previously that Gemma and Joe that work in the studio here, they have. And I know, a little bit like yourself, trying to outsmart, they were sort of walking around, picking things up, putting them down, moving them around, just to see if they did get billed for the correct thing. And lo and behold, they did, because it's completely, it's massively sophisticated software and technology behind this, isn't it? How does it work? Do you know the answer to that?
I know
cameras and
obviously. It's a multi-sensor, multi-device system and solution, very complex. It's not just a simple, some shelves and some cameras watching people. There's all sorts of different elements that are going on. There's pressure sensors inside the shelves that know exactly the weight of things. There's cameras tracking things around. There's radar sensors going on there, so it tracks sort of how far you are away from a shelf and knows when you put something down. So it's a very complex but very elegant solution that you can go in and pick something up and it knows the exact weight of a tin of beans. You go and pick it up from one shelf. I don't want it, and put it back on another shelf. The sensors then identify that, but then it's tracking you through the store as well. So it ties what you are doing to your actual spend.
It's like Big Brother. It sounds scary, doesn't it? So how does it work then in terms of the payment? You walk through the door, what does it do? Does it react to your phone, your bank card? What do you do? Or is it something that you have to set up? That's the bit that baffles me.
So there's and again, they're streamlining that process. At the minute, there are a few stores that have this already. It's normally linked to an app.
Okay.
And then you will scan a QR code or some form of code. If you don't have that app, download it, set up your account, put your payment details in, and then you can walk through the store.
Now, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you think that's where we're going to head? I don't know how far in the future, but one day, like maybe our kids or our kids' kids, is that going to be the norm, that you just walk in? You never see a human, you just walk in and out. Across research, can you go and buy a car like that, do you reckon, in the future?
It would be great if you
could. Putting me on the spot, yeah, it would.
Scan an app and walk out with a Ferrari. I don't think that was
maybe a bit out there, the car. But, in terms of like your food shopping, your clothes shopping, your bits and bats that you get on a daily basis, that's going to be where we are headed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's brand new. It's the start of that curve. It will explode. We sort of talked about the almost the predecessor to that last week in the cashierless tills. And actually, just to sort of build on that, I went into my local superstore yesterday, and there was, I'd say that's now more like 80-20 in favour of cashierless. You can scan yourself, or self-service checkouts where you've got maybe 2 staff, and that was perhaps 30 tills for 2 staff, as opposed to 30 staff for 30 tills, and then only a handful now. So that's transitioning to, and that's probably in my opinion, a bit of a precursor to losing that personal touch at the checkout, and maybe seeding the conversation for a lot of people to go into frictionless stores. So I think it's just getting people used to, you go in there, you're going to scan your stuff, be honest, and then walk out and do the transaction. Whereas this is that next step. Whether that's a success is probably down to the success of these pilots that are being launched all around the country and globally, and how consumers react to that, how well they take off. there's going to be all sorts of pilots all over the country over the next 12 to 18 months that I'm seeing and I'm sort of involved with, stuff I can't necessarily talk about and tell you about, but
so I can't discuss
I feel
I'll
really
find
important
out.
now. But yeah,
A-lister.
it's coming. It's definitely going to explode over the next 12 to 18 months. You'll see a lot more of that. And again, if the consumers, it will always be led by the consumers if they react positively to this. I think more and more businesses, you know, the clothes shops and whatnot will move towards that. There's different conversations going on there of whether they keep that, and that was sort of where at the top of the episode where I was talking about the difference between retail and e-tail. They are almost competing for the same customers, and a lot of e-tailers, they've got a separate battle going with bricks and mortar stores. I think frictionless stores could help that bricks and mortar environment fight back against e-tailers because it's simplifying that journey.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it. I was thinking the cogs were going whilst you were talking. I was just thinking, is this a good thing or not? I know you probably don't have the answer to this question, but I wonder, I'd be curious to know in terms of cost saving, because obviously that's what retailers will be looking at, the bottom line. So taking out all the staff wages that you've got, how does that balance out in terms of, obviously the self-checkouts are expensive, I would imagine, to put in, software updates all of the time. Then you've got to account for the fact that not everybody is honest and somebody does sneak things in the things, so there's loss involved. But would you imagine that still the cost savings for the self-service far outweighs what your staffing bills would be?
Yeah, and again, it comes to this automation. So it's very, very early in that industry. So the cost with any new technology is always going to be higher at the start.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
There are businesses that are focusing purely on that experience. So they're doing all of the grunt work, all of the training. They're taking that to the retailers. So they're not necessarily the retailers doing this themselves. They may be working with a company that's been doing this for 3-5 years. And they just license out their software or implementation or whatever that looks like to then go and deliver that experience as that store. So as that gets more and more, the price of that will come down. As that price comes down, there's going to be a compelling argument for businesses and again, similar to what I've just been talking about with the superstores, of do we have 2 cashiers across 30 self-service tills against 30 cashiers across 30 tills and still retain that human interaction? It's probably going to go down that route. And the frictionless stores, again, may accelerate that because the cost of you're not employing anybody.
No, I know, it's scary. So, you
still have to
have
some employees, but
I'd like to hope so. I mean, I don't, as a sociable person, obviously efficiency and getting things done quickly. Unfortunately, we are very impatient these days. So yes, there's an argument for that. But never seeing a human face in a store or just one, I find the whole thing mind blowing. But I appreciate, you can't fight against what's invariably going to happen.
There's still jobs in store. So, and again, I maybe presented it wrong with the frictionless stores that there's going to be nobody in. There's still going to be people required to stack the shelves.
Yeah.
Now, at least, until we develop a robot that can reach the top shelf and stack all the tins with the label at the front, because that would be awful if they weren't.
OCD there. Nothing wrong with that.
I think it's again, we talked about it in the Is AI Taking Our Jobs episode. It's that skill set reappropriation. It's just moving people around. So rather than them being on the tills, they maybe go to stacking shelves. They may be going working in the warehouse. They may be working in the marketing department. They may have to skill up and do something else in finance, for example.
Just before we move on to sort of how it also works in retail online, I read an article actually this week when I was kind of looking into this about obviously the data that is taken from that, which we would have had really, available, but maybe not analysed in the same way from people scanning your shopping. But all of these things that we've spoken about in store, so, like the cameras everywhere, the sensors, maybe targeted advertising, etc., is that data is used in many different ways. One of them being in how the store is laid out. So traditionally, I know there's sort of like a psychology maybe to the way that we shop, and obviously they set things in certain areas, so your beans are there and your bread's there and you've got to walk past the chocolate and all the things that you think, oh, go on, I'll treat myself. Is that data's being used to maybe reorganise stores, so you'd group together maybe things that you'd buy together. So you might have your beans and your bread in a certain aisle and all everything that makes that a little bit more efficient. So that's one way that obviously that, I mean, beans on toast, we know that's an obvious one, but there might be, you know, particular food trends or whatever where you're mixing foods that you might not have done before, or a new recipe. So that's one way that they can use the data that they're collecting. How else is the data used maybe from the retailer's perspective to cost save, to make things more efficient and all of that things? How are they using that data that they collect in store that we've no idea that they're collecting on us?
So I think it's important to say that a lot of that is anonymous.
Yes.
So,
because that is scary for people, isn't it? Thinking you're getting like body scanned as you go through. You've got to make sure you've got your good underwear. There's none of that going on.
A lot of people are going to be very paranoid now. They know how many tins of beans I've got in my cupboard. No, a lot of that is anonymised data. So from what I see, it's used more for that operational efficiency. Like you said, there was that buying patterns, and it is psychological, exactly what you said, and I laughed to myself when you mentioned that. But at the tills, there never used to be anything at the tills, but now just putting things like chewing gum. You always see chewing gum at the till. You always see bars of chocolate, which are more expensive than buying a 4-pack. Yeah. But it's the convenience. It's right there, and there's that psychological element of, I'll just have that and just.
It's just a bit evil as well. Now I've got a child, I think, oh, you horror. I would have been the one that would have said, Mom, can I have a chocolate bar?
They've none left.
And you just think, oh, because you've got to wait in the queue. You just shove one on, don't you? It's unfair. And they need to put at eye level all little things for your children to find. I'm on to you. But yeah, going back to the psychology of it, obviously that's always existed. Things like, you know, that would even play into like the types of music that they play in store and various other things. But obviously that data now is immediate. So retailers presumably are responding to it maybe in the way that they lay out stores, or like, you know, stock when they buy stock in, or, you know, there's certain products more popular on a Wednesday as a random thing to say. But there's all of that data is readily available, and there will be patterns that they can use to implement things like, I would imagine, like ordering particular stock in, the logistics of how they get things in, maybe even information on the sorts of products that are stolen regularly that they might not have known before. Is this the sort of way that retailers are using that?
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff. So again, just dropping back to the digital signage piece, some of the stuff that we're doing in digital signage is focusing on heat mapping stores as well. So it's tracking footfall and traffic of where people are going in a store. That is really important information for smaller retailers as well as bigger retailers, because you know where you're going to get the most people walking. You know, a customer journey might be in and through the right-hand side of a shop and then back out, and you're seeing that on a heat map of the most traffic is there. So you're going to place the better items on that journey, or you could use that intelligence to shape your store in a different way that changes the customer journey and forces everyone down the left track, like some shops do, and you can't get out until you've walked through the entire store.
You have to walk, you have to walk past the bakery whilst they've just made some new fresh bread. Oh yeah, but yeah, I mean, it is really interesting, and I guess that sort of information particularly wouldn't have been readily available before. So you'd have seen what people were buying, you'd have had an idea of who was in when in terms of what they were paying, and maybe a camera on the door. But mapping their journey around the store, that data is it's priceless, really, isn't it, for a retailer?
Yeah. And as soon as a key element to all, I'd say broadly, all AI, the success of AI and the accuracy of AI is having data. So at this point, and having a very well curated data set is key to sort of AI in general. But at this point, we're probably at that almost, again, a precursor, a starter of they're collecting this data, these types of information. We don't know what they'll do with that just yet. There may be other AI powered systems and solutions that will be developed because they've got a cluster of customer data and traffic data. So they'll use that in a different way. So that there may be other AI powered technologies that we're now prompting people to develop, and we're going to get 25% each, I think we discussed last week.
I think we should put it up, to be honest. I think we're being too generous, don't you?
We're giving everybody the ideas now. They've got the data, we've got the ideas.
Exactly, yeah. You can't do anything without us. Right, so I mean, that is really interesting. And there's probably, in terms of the future, because we've talked quite a lot about what's happening now, we have nodded towards the future, maybe frictionless will become more popular, etc. It's hard to know where it's going to end up, isn't it? It really is, in terms of what data they're going to collect from us. I mean, a really good example, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the loyalty cards that they use in store, I mean, as a consumer, you lap them up because you might get extra points or triple points on a Wednesday or whatever. And, like Tesco, if we're talking about Tesco, and there are other stores, I'm sure some of them do the same, but they get club card prices on certain things, which are very appealing, to be honest. But behind that is a whole data collection thing.
That's
but
why
what do we call it? Exactly.
It was designed for that purpose, to track a customer's journey. And for me, it was one of the best marketing ideas that I've ever seen out of retail. They gave this card, it was a reward scheme and pitched as a reward scheme. Everyone thought of it as, well, every 3 months or every month I'm going to get a series of vouchers or discounts, or I can use points to get some discount if other stores and whatever that looks like. But it is exactly that, to sort of remove that anonymity. It's a big word, that.
It's very good. Well done.
But it's to sort of give them the buying patterns of specific people, to tie that to a particular person. So how frequently are you buying certain beans? How frequently are you buying certain types of bread? And then they can use that for cross-marketing purposes of, well, we'll give you 10p off this version of bread if you try that instead. So there's, that's been going for a long time. They will have vast amounts of data and information that are really, really important and could be capitalized and used in some way, shape or form. I think the industry is trying to find ways to use that kind of data right now and how to make that most efficient, whether they've seen spikes of certain types of brands of bread, for example, and I think the education and the intelligence there needs to be the deep analytics of trying to figure out and add logic and reason behind those buying patterns. Are people buying more beans on toast at the start of the month because they've spent all of the money, or are they buying more beer when the football's on, and using that intelligence to then sort of help with that promotion and marketing? I think they already do that anyway, but...
Well, yeah, and I've got a point to make on that. But before I do, so when we talk about analysing the data and linking that back to jobs and new jobs, presumably there is a software platform or something that does that analysis for you, or can that be done by humans? Like, where does the human and these new jobs that we have in the future, where does that fit into that whole sort of process that we're talking about new ways of analysing data and not quite knowing what they're going to look at next? Where does the human fit into that sort of side of things?
So, I mean, a human will be doing some form of data analytics. That's an actual job role now, data analytics. So people will be doing that. That can be automated and can be, and probably is in some places, powered by AI. If you think of AI, so there's sort of three. AI is an umbrella term. I mean, again, we discussed this way back. Machine learning is a subset of that. That's effectively that automation, that teaching it to look for a yes or a no. Deep learning is you're showing it examples of something and getting it to learn its own standards, its own machine learning algorithms, and to teach itself, so you can show it fresh data and then make an assumption. That's basically what a data analyst is doing. They've been trained over many years, likely, of how to look at patterns of data and apply analytics to that. That then copied into an AI world, you can automate that with deep learning.
I don't know, it's mind-blowing sometimes, isn't it, to think of all the data and how it's being used and the communication that then is just sent to you instantaneously. It just blows my mind.
This is exactly what I was talking about with the frictionless stores and the success of that. The success of any technology is driven by the consumer's actual use of it. So if people are taking up these offers, it's driving that it is working. So we'll keep doing it.
And we take up the offers because we want a good deal. We want things to be efficient and quick because we're impatient these days, and we want to have a good experience. So it does go both ways. So sticking with online then, let's talk, and again, in previous episodes, because there's always going to be some overlap, how are we using artificial intelligence as its broader term in online shopping, online retail?
So a lot more of that is... again, it's almost invisible technology. You won't see it, but a lot of what we were talking about then, from the the targeted marketing, the fraud systems, and then recommendation engines are a really big one as well for sort of the online experience. It knows you're clicking on certain products, and then it just so happens to have a pair of shoes flashing away over here as a linked item or whatever that looks like. So yeah, recommendations are a very big part of that e-tail experience.
I'll tell you what I saw for the first time. I've never seen this before. I've seen on certain ones, I know we talked about ASOS before, where you get a dress and it says, do you want to see similar? Probably a similar sort of thing. But actually when it says similar, it's a tentative link sometimes. It might be a similar colour or length or whatever. But this one actually said, do you want to view visually similar? So that's using some form of like image recognition, obviously, because I have to say it was probably the most accurate that I've used, as in I thought, oh, go on, especially with this in mind, I'll have a little look what it says. And it almost did sort of do like an analysis down the page whilst it loaded. And then lo and behold, it brought up maybe only 6 dresses that were either same colours, same length, but they're pretty much bob on.
Yeah, that's the power of AI.
I've not seen that before though, where they actually use the terminology, would you like to see visually similar?
Yeah.
I know the recommendations sometimes bring it, but as I say, it's sometimes a tentative link, but I was quite blown away by that.
Yeah, but you've hit the nail on the head. That is basic image recognition, and maybe that's where the retailers, if they see that as a success, some of the e-tailers might start to adopt that and copy and paste it into their business. And yeah, that is basic AI. So I mentioned the data as being the most important factor there. The data for a lot of e-tailers is actually quite uniform, if this makes sense. So a lot of the poses in dresses are done by the same photographer, and they'll traditionally get the models to do a visually similar pose. So you're going to get the same angle of the dress all the time. That uniformity of photography will actually help that AI algorithm become even more efficient, because it knows where the dress is, it knows where the shorts are in that particular shot. So it's easier for that to derive an accurate result.
So bringing it back to retail then, if there are people listening right now that want to know how, and maybe it's a small business or a giant business, whoever it is, how do they get in touch and find out more, and how can Scan actually help them?
Just simply reach out to any of the team over at Scan. We've got different business units aimed at different products and whatnot, but we are there to sort of help guide people through that, whether that's looking at digital signage, implementing AI, and everything in between that. So yeah, simply reach out, and we can do our best to help.
And hopefully, as we've demonstrated here as well, we're a down-to-earth bunch. So these complicated terms and what might be quite overwhelming, genuinely though, as a team, you're very sort of down-to-earth and able to answer any questions. That there's no such thing as a silly question where this is involved, is it? Because it's quite newish technology and quite a massive subject.
Definitely. I mean, I think for us, it's very non-judgmental. A lot of it is bleeding edge, so it's brand new, and people aren't expected to know everything about it. So, we want to make people comfortable with that technology, and we want to make people comfortable with all the jargon that goes around it. So, we're more than happy and comfortable to sort of explain anything.
Excellent. Well, retail, as I say, it's a massive, big subject. No doubt we will return to this because there's plenty more we could talk about. Maybe with a guest, or get one of our guests in to talk about some real world life examples and how they're using it. So that's it for this time. Thank you very much, Dan, for your expertise as ever. And next time, join us where we're going to be talking about AI in healthcare. See you then.